When I first started Riveting Trips, I was a little bit exhausted. I said yes to everything. Clients were saying, hey, can you book me a hotel in Rome? I said, yes. Can you do this for me? I said, yes. And you say yes to everything, you get a little exhausted. You don't have your systems in place. And I I needed a break, right? You need to take a break. So the problem wasn't the clients, it was me. I didn't have any systems. I didn't have a process. And in today's episode, I want to talk about how to move from an order taker to an advisor, right? We kind of mentioned it in episode 3 a little bit earlier about how to carve out your niche and how to become an expert. But in today's episode, I really want to hammer that a little bit stronger. Hi, everyone. My name is Jeanie Colclough. Welcome to Passport to Profit. I'm the host of this podcast, and I'm trying to help everyone who is growing their travel business. So in this episode, I want to really hammer on the fact of moving from order taker to expert advisor, right? We mentioned it in episode 2 about how to attain or achieve that kind of expertise. First of all, when I first started this business, I said yes to pretty much everything, right? I was so afraid of hammering on a niche. I was so afraid of charging planning fees. There was a lot of things I was afraid of, right? So what I want you to do is I want you to think about what kinds of travel do you want to sell? Who do you want to focus on? And how do you want to achieve this, right? So I'm going to say like the first few days or the first year or so, I said yes to everything. Someone would say, book a hotel to Rome. Sure. Book this. Okay. Book a Disney cruise. Okay. Right. Book this. Yes. Right. And I was an order taker. I did not say, oh, well, did you actually want to consider these other alternatives? Because these other alternatives might be a better option. Right. I think clients appreciate when you actually offer alternatives and they go, oh, well, thank you for considering or thank you for offering. But if they decide, no, okay, I'm going to go do with this, that's fine. Okay. So, if you are spending lots of time and not getting the income you want, you need to really hammer down on what your niche is and who you're going to serve. I really, really do believe that. Okay. Because the second thing is that's really important is to become an expert, an authority figure in your field. I've been a Condé Nast top travel specialist for the past 5 years, specifically in a couple of regions and a couple of different types of travel. So one of the regions is Italy. The other one is South Korea. Right. I've spent a lot of time in both countries and I'm familiar with the itineraries that can happen, what's doable, what's not doable, the budgets that are necessary to be required, the best seasons to go, where to go eat, what to go see, And for example, when clients want to go to Italy and they say, hey, I would love to go to the same circuit as everybody else, Rome, Milan, Venice, or Rome, Florence, Venice, or now the hotspot is Puglia, and then Sardinia is becoming popular, and Sicily is becoming popular. They're not super creative, right? They just see what they see on the internet, what they see on Instagram, what their friends tell them. And so sometimes I say, look, what about this other itinerary, off the beaten path place that has yet to be discovered? You can say, amazing. I went there before everyone else, before it became popular, right? Like Puglia. I went to Puglia, I don't know, almost 20 years ago before it became popular. So you need to think about how can you provide that service to your clients where they can kind of show off to their friends or come back from their trip and go, wow, if it hadn't been for Jeanie, I wouldn't have even considered this place, right? Same with South Korea. South Korea, I know all the rage now, K-pop demon hunters and stuff like that. K-pop, BTS, I get it, right? But aside from K-pop and K-dramas, what else is there to offer people? And there is a lot more to offer, but people don't see that because they just go to Seoul, they go to Busan, and they go to Jeju, right? They do the same circuit all the time. But if I know the client, then I can recommend something, right? So that way, and you become an authority figure and you're a trusted advisor. So being a trusted advisor is really, really important in this business, right? I want to talk about a couple of client examples. So I had one honeymoon client, right? They were younger. I think late 20s, early 30s, and they wanted to go to Italy. They had 10 days, but they had this crazy itinerary where they were visiting 9 cities. And I said, whoa, I put the brakes on. I said, look, like, I get it. You're young, you got lots of energy, but you will be driving or in a train for 45 hours a day. You barely have time to pack and unpack your clothes. So do you really want to do this? And it took a little bit of coaxing from me to tell them, like, you won't understand, or you won't get to know this country at all. So they said, okay, sure, let's slow it down a bit, right? I had another client that used chat to generate a 2-week itinerary to Portugal. And in that 2-week itinerary, she was zigzagging through the country. And I know Portugal's not super big, but still big, right? You could easily spend a whole week in Porto in that area and a whole week in Lisbon in that area. Instead, in 2 weeks, she was zigzagging back and forth, up and down, and I said, do you realize that this itinerary has you going from Lisbon to Porto, back down to Lisbon, to go to Algarve, then to go to Alentejo, then back up to Porto? And she goes, no, I didn't even think about that. I said, yeah, you're wasting your time. So we always advise clients like, oh, I would recommend that you do this instead of these other itinerary that you had in mind, right? And we'll try to still work with the client. So you need to make that shift from being an order taker, saying yes to everything, and to kind of go with your gut. So if you're like, for example, a Disney expert, right? And I'm not a Disney expert at all. And some client comes to you and says, look, I want to go and do a week-long trip at Disney World. You need to advise him, look, in order to make the best of your time at Disney World, this is what I would recommend, right? And we recommend this because of our previous times in Disney. The other areas that I'm an expert in are family travel, because I've been traveling with my kids for, 13, 14 years now. And they've traveled to 24 different countries. So I know what it's like to travel with young children. And as they grow up, right? As they go from infant to toddler to preteen to teen, now teen stage, right? And soon enough, adult children. In a few years, they'll be adult children. It's kind of scary. And then the other one is food and wine travel. I love me some dry red wine, folks. Okay. And some nice crisp white wines too. So if you are interested in food and wine, seek out those events. We'll talk about different events to go to as a food and wine expert. I can talk about that, no problem. And talk about, and bring that back. Share that with your clients and go, look, this is what I went to. I went to this amazing winery. I went to this amazing winery in Czechia, right? And I want to talk to them, but they have no social media. They have no website. So it's really hard for these people to get Americans or if you don't know that area, you're not going to know about this wine guy, right? Amazing wine. I wish I had bought more. Anyway, so these are the kinds of expertise that you can share with your clients. And this is why I think carving out a niche is really important. So charge for your expertise. Don't be afraid of charging a planning fee. You do not want tire kickers. The other thing that I would recommend is that if you have a client who books regularly, maybe you switch to a concierge model. A concierge, though, has to be available 24/7. So you need to figure out, is that worth your time and money? And we can talk about concierges later on. If you'd like to hear about that, let me know. If you would like to join us in our host agency, please fill out an application. The link is below, and join our Facebook group. And I hope this has been helpful. And so this is another episode of Passport to Profit. Ciao, ciao for now, folks.